Yo, what's going on? Today is December 2nd, our third episode for Health Revolution. Kind of unscripted, another discussion on warm-ups in general. The the philosophy behind warm-ups, why we do it the way we do it, why you should or shouldn't do it, the difference between the dynamic warm-ups versus static warm-ups versus no warm-ups, which one is better? These are the discussions that we're going to have today. I think we should start by talking about our philosophy behind it first, right? Because I know that each of us, that does different type of activities, and we tend to do different things. Maybe similar for the most part, but for the most part, we do some sort of warm ups to help prepare us or our athletes, right? I don't know, Matt, do you want to start first?
Yeah, sure. Um, I would say there's a couple of just like thoughts that go into like as far as me with warming up. I think one is like specificity, man. Like it should look like the thing that you're going to do. Um, and then the other thing is like let's just get the system activated. So those are like probably the two like broad ideas I have, and I'll detail that. So like today, I got to the gym. Was feeling kind of crappy, right? It's that like 3, 4 p.m. lull after work, like you're pretty low energy. So what I did is I did like 30 seconds or so or a minute on the ski erg, right? Get the system going a little bit, right? That increases heart rate, gets your nervous system going a little bit, gets heart your respiratory rate up, all that good stuff, right? Gets the system going. Um, yeah, this is after doing just like a little quick, like little mobility routine that I like to do. Um, and then I went to the squat rack because I was squatting and I squatted the bar. And then I jumped around a little bit. So I did some plyometrics. Maybe I'll video that one time and share it. Just doing some jumping. And then I went back to the bar and did 135 and then did more jumping and did back to the bar and did 225. So right, we're building the weight there, right? My warm up was specific to the task that I was doing, which was quote unquote heavy barbell back squats. And yeah, I kind of mixed in some plyometrics there too, again to again get heart rate up, activate the system. So I would say those are my two like main philosophies on that. I think I'll we can maybe touch on more later. I'll leave it there for now, maybe.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Anthony, what about you? I know
All right.
prepping for a
So
marathon.
yeah, we won't start there, but philosophy on warm up probably starts with youth sports, and I mean that definitely is an area that I think makes an impression. I would not advocate for one method over one over the other, as long as it's getting you like Matt was saying, preps you for the sport, so something that's kind of specific to what you're going to do and get your heart rate up, kind of mentally, psychologically prepares you. For starting as a youth athlete, I think we're all exposed to static stretching as one of the first things that we do. And I would be interested to see how the methods have changed over the years because I'm sure dynamic warm ups and some of those other things are not like new to us. But like static stretching is not something that is like, yeah, it's not new either, and it's not going away necessarily. Um, yeah, I'm interested in doing a little bit more research into this because I think it's important to define each of those different methods of dynamic warm ups, static warm ups, and also there's a lot of different terms out there, and I think that gets confusing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. For last thing I'd just say is that like personally, I think the more you get into like a sport or a movement, and not even PT specific, but just like from an athletic background, you kind of fall into a routine and you do something that gets you ready for the sport, but you don't necessarily consider it like a dynamic warm up or static warm up, but all those components might be part of it. Um, Kind of just doing something that feels good. I'll leave it at that.
No, no, I think I agree with you, man. Like I feel like for me, the biggest thing is time. Right? I think for me, the biggest thing is time. I remember when I first started lifting a while back, right? Or even like playing soccer. Okay. So what we would do is like would uh this high school team or whatever would run first, go for like couple mile runs, and then we'd come back and we would do like kind of create a circle. We'd just do some static, static stretching there, right? When I started lifting, at this time, didn't know nothing, right? And so you see people at the gym doing a lot of foam rolls, a lot of like, I don't know, man, just put in there trying to be as flexible as possible. And then I think that just in general that the fitness, um health and fitness, like, um category, the group of people kind of gravitates towards that because that's what we've been seeing, right? So, but I definitely think that over time, I've realized time is very, very, very important. Um, a while back, I think we were still in school. I remember, like, I was talking to Matt you about this, and we were talking about like how much time do you actually have to be at the gym, right? And how can we make things most effective while we're at it? And that definitely got me thinking. And over the years of like kind of looking into it, I think how would I make my whatever I'm doing this most effective? And that kind of has like drawn my philosophy into like how I look at warm-ups and stretching, dynamic warm-ups, whatever, getting my athletes ready for sports. And so I definitely tend to gravitate towards dynamic movements, right? Exactly how Matt you were describing. How do I prep our body to be ready for the sports or the lifts that you're doing? And so I think and we can dive more into this, but I think that's kind of where I fall into it right now. Let's start by talking about like a different type of stretching first, right? I think like we set a tone for what they are, and I think it would be a good idea to kind of break it down and go a little bit more deeper. Obviously, we don't have the extensive research behind it, but from based on our limited amount of research and our knowledge of human body, we should be able to have like a good discussion. And we can come back to this later again and have like a follow-up later video that we can make. Anthony, do you want to
I'll
start?
start.
Yeah.
I was gonna play devil's advocate and say and talk about static stretching a little bit. To define static stretching, it's your obviously your main goal is to prepare for the sport or the activity you're doing. So if you're an upper body athlete, you're probably stretching your upper body, your trunk. If you're a lower body athlete, you're probably stretching your legs, your ankles, your knees, hips. But moving your limbs through their full range of motion, or um, going for a end of position, so like bending your knee fully or your hip, and looking for like that muscle stretch of like hold. Traditionally, there's a hold involved for that static stretch, and thought is that if we have a tight muscle that we want to get our flexibility a little bit better, improving our flexibility is going to improve our performance and decrease injury risk. And I think that'd be good to talk about what research shows about it. But just to define it, that's probably what I'd say.
Okay. What about you, Matt? Let's talk about like some of the dynamic things. Let's define dynamic warm-up.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's obviously like dynamic stretching, which I don't do too much myself or with patients, but that would be just more like it's called like ballistic stretching, right? That's at least one of them where you get in a position, you do these little like mini movements or whatever. I remember learning about that.
Yeah,
Don't do a ton of
honestly.
that. Probably, and I believe it's definitely it's probably not the most effective for tissue lengthening. So yeah, I mean, like a dynamic warm up would be, stuff where you're out and about getting moving, right? I mean, it could be, like a child's pose for, let's say you're gonna like deadlift or something, and you want to just expose your back to a little bit of lumbar flexion, right? Lower back rounding. You kind of do this child's pose to prone press up type thing. I do that sometimes with my patients. So yeah, I'm definitely biased, obviously, right? Just we all are. I think it's important to acknowledge that. But like with my patients, I'm more like quote unquote active mobility than like the static stretching. And then yeah, if we're working with like for myself, or I'm working with more like a higher level person, I'll probably have them like go on the bike a little bit to just get moving, get exposed to positions, but also get that heart rate up. And then yeah, we're probably gonna do some sort of plyometrics if it's appropriate for them and they can. Again, like you can talk about specificity, right? Like I think if you're gonna like do heavy barbell back squats, it's nice to be specific in the fact that you should probably warm up with the bar before jumping right to your working set. Just like psychologically too. Try that and tell me that doesn't suck going right into your max weight working set.
Oh, dude, yeah.
That would definitely be sucky.
I'm gonna give you some pushback if it's okay. Can I say something?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Sure.
Go for it.
Um, are you saying that dynamic warm up would be doing like getting on the bike and or getting under the barbell for squatting?
It's under the term of warm up. Yeah. I
Okay,
don't know if we need
cool.
to label it
Um,
dynamic, but
I can agree with that. I feel like there's a couple ways to define dynamic warm ups, but when I as a runner, or even just like coming from the if I ignore my what we know about like PT, but just come from like what athletic background or experience we have prior. When I think of dynamic warm up, it's like you're static stretching, but you're just doing like a little bit more actively. So I was like,
Yeah,
I know that's kind of vague, but thinking like instead of like a stretch and hold for your hamstrings, like you're
yeah,
doing like a leg sweep, which I know in the sense is kind of like you're doing a hinge and you're kind of doing like a deadlift type of movement. Um, but I kind of I just thought it was cool that you brought it up as like biking or getting under the bar for a squat because that
Mm.
was not kind of where my head was going with it.
well,
yeah,
I
in my head, I would say what you're describing with like I know what you're saying, like the hamstring scoops,
Yeah,
classic. Yeah, that's in my head. That's more of like a dynamic stretch, right? Whereas dynamic warm up can be that's a super broad term in my head. Like, yeah, it could be jumping around, it could be plyometrics, it could be exposing yourself to the positions you're going to get into, stuff like that. Yeah.
I would agree with you. I've always kind of like I see it as it's because it's the broad thing. I kind of almost see it as like a doing the activity itself, but like at a very reduced, you know, like intensity. I guess is how I see it. Like for example, like for my soccer players, right? Um, I used to just kind of used to do some stretching and stuff, like do static stretching, but now I don't do that. Like we go for a run, we do some like very like I guess dynamic, just moving around while doing a light jog. We'll do some like, you know, high kicks, open closed doors, shuffles, right? Jumps. And then just kind of go right into the doing like a light passes, long ball passes, kind of like that. I kind of see that as a dynamic warm up, right? Right. I guess that's how I define it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
that's cool. I really like it, and I think that maybe gives us three things we should maybe dig into a little bit because I was thinking static stretching and like a dynamic warm up, but now we've kind of said static stretching, and dynamic warm up, and those are all three like methods of kind of preparing for sport that I think is common. Would be cool to look at.
What
Um,
what is the overall goal? I think also is another thing to I guess look into it too, right? Because if the goal, I mean, obviously the overarching goal should be always the injury preventions, right? But sometimes, like, I know that you do things just to kind of be psychologically ready. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. Can I go on
Um,
a tangent real quick?
yeah.
So I would say, or if I were to play devil's advocate for static stretching, I
Mhm.
say it's something that we commonly use. I don't know, in our practice for PT. It's something that we provide our patients with as like is a low risk, kind of high reward, or kind of an easier movement to get people going. It doesn't require a whole lot of thinking, and it's easier to program. Versus if you're going to do dynamic warm ups, then it becomes a little bit more complicated. And not that it needs to be complicated, we just need to have fun, play with the movement. But in the PT world, it's hard to kind of constantly be grinding those wheels and say, like, all right, all these things. I don't know. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
I don't know, dude. Like, I again, for me, it's time. Okay, because time is limited, especially when we're seeing them, right? How am I gonna make the most efficient 30 minutes or 60 minutes, right? And if I'm gonna spend like, 10 minutes of just doing a static stretching, like I feel like that's not really beneficial for me. Not saying that I don't do it,
Mm.
because sometimes like I have two patients at once that I'm seeing and they're coming at the same time. Or like sometimes there's three coming around, which makes it really complicated. And given the circumstances and the environment, I feel like we are kind of almost forced into that doing something passive,
Mm.
right? To
We have limited
balance
resources.
yourself.
Mm.
Yeah, that's frustrating because that like goes against your values, right? You just explained that your value is like being active and being time efficient, but then you're triple booked and you kind of have to do something that doesn't
Yeah.
align with you, which is tough. I mean, I'm there, right? We're there sometimes.
I think from an ethical background, anything that, like, I would say, anytime I've given static stretches, it's been done with in an ethical way. Like, I'm not going to give somebody, if it's an athlete and I know that like they can do something more active, I'm not going to give them static stretching. But depends
That would
on
be
who the
unethical of
patient
you.
is.
Yeah.
What?
That would be unethical of you.
Yeah, be against what my values are. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Okay. I feel like one is one is static stretching appropriate, right? I feel like that would be a better question to ask because um say for example, so I think we kind of talked about it before. I had a patient after mastectomy that they were experiencing a very tight pecs, right? Would that be more appropriate to do static stretching at that moment and spend some time there, or do you think that doing some dynamic warm up in itself and then loading, I guess their antagonist muscle groups to kind of take up some load, or even doing the action in itself will, improve their cross fibers and do some muscle lengthening or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I think again, right, like acknowledging our bias, right? Like, so I think if somebody has had like a positive experience with stretching in the past, or like they think highly of stretching, and our goal is to like just be movement experts, right? Promote whatever, not that term, but like just promote movement, promote people being active, and promote like not having fear around movement. I think it would be lame for us to then say like, the research behind stretching sucks. Like, don't do that. Whereas it's like, yeah, like, dude, you want to stretch your hamstring? Psh, go for it. Cool. Do that 2 times a day. Or yeah, you want to stretch your low back? Sweet. And that's probably, I'm almost speaking to myself because I don't say that to people. Oh, stretching is a waste of time, but like, I maybe could ask and dig into, oh, what do you think would work? Or right, because we know patients' expectations is kind of a massive influence. And then I think another reason it would be indicated would be if somebody's like super sensitive, right? Super high pain. They basically can't tolerate much of anything, right? I consider static stretching like very, very low level, pretty scalable, right? You can just position yourself as much or as little as you want to that. So maybe that would be again, I don't use it much, but that would be a case where
Like where it would be
could
appropriate.
see, I could see myself doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. What you think, Anthony? I guess.
Good question. I know we've talked about this one before, and like great question because we see people coming in for mastectomies in the clinic, post surgery, and some of those like secondary complications of like, all right, having chest pain or that tissue can be, we'll call it tight. Um, I think it depends on a lot of what the patient's background is, and from a PT perspective, that's the fun part of figuring out where they're at, and that will determine kind of what's
Well,
appropriate.
do you think, like, I'm asking you guys, that static stretching will improve their tightness?
I I don't know. I would be curious what it's right. That's a specific question, right? Like
Yeah.
in women's status post mastectomy, does static stretching, yeah, I'd be curious. Like, is it more effective than them just like, right? Like, what would like, does hold time matter? Have they done that? Have they looked at just like positioning your arm in that position, like grabbing a doorway and just like kind of sort of stretching or stretching, and then versus like have they had people hold it like 2 or 3 minutes? I don't know. I mean, I would have to say if you're going to be regularly exposing yourself, right? If you lack shoulder extension, you're regularly exposing yourself to that
Mhm.
through whatever means. I would like to think that that would improve.
I agree. I'd say the same. And the only other thing I'd say to kind of add on that, and maybe not trying to add or open a can of worms, but I would think that stretching would be effective in this case. And sometimes other interventions are more appropriate or like have been helpful for that sense of tightness. Like I've had patients come in for and I've had this conversation with other people, but for a mastectomy patient, there's that tightness, sometimes manual work, which I know is like controversial, but manual work in this case
How dare you bring up manual therapy?
can be beneficial.
Oh, I know we're going like kind of off, like off, like tangent here right now. But I definitely will tell you that like I did do static stretching on this point, right, with this patient specifically, but I didn't spend a whole lot of time doing a static stretching. I did because she was a someone that loved going to the gym, lifting weights. I prioritized that over the doing static stretching. She did gain her range of motion back almost to like full bilateral symmetry, right? And she was lifting a lot of weights, but she's still complaining about tightness. I don't know how much static stretching really did it, but maybe it was the other things that helped. But kind of tying it back to our discussion, I guess the question is like, one, what are the purpose of it? Right? What's the purpose? Is it to just stretch to get psychologically ready, or is it to stretch to a warm up, or is it stretch like some sort of warm up to do some sort of injury prevention kind of thing like that? What is your priority? And overall, I think that would be kind of better way of looking at it. Maybe I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I like that a lot actually. Again, if I were to not talking about your person with the mastectomy, that's an interesting case,
Yeah.
and static stretching is probably I might include that in that. I haven't treated much mastectomy, but just talking like an athlete, like yeah, the reason I would use static stretching is like for the psychological preparedness. Like, oh no, I feel good when I stretch. All right, sweet. Like, go stretch for whatever. Understand it's not maybe not the most time efficient thing, but like if that's what you want to do, you can do that. Yeah.
Anthony, you look like you're about to say something.
Nah, I got nothing on that one. But I agree. I'll say that.
Yeah. Um. Okay. Then let me ask you this then. What should we include? What do you need, or what do you not necessarily need? If you're trying to, I don't know. I guess the example, since we're all some form of athletes or old athletes, What do we define athlete as? No, never mind. That's gonna open the whole thing. But what do we need? Or what do we don't need to kind of bring it back to warm up? What do you think is the best way of going about it?
I mean, I don't think you need much. I think if you're somebody who like, so again, I keep going back to lifting. Rainy, you're probably gonna keep going back to running, but like, again, the specificity is kind of where my head goes. Like, you could probably go in there, just go to the barbell if you're gonna squat and do that. Like, you probably would be okay as long as the weight is good, right? As long as you're doing a weight that you can handle, as long as your like volume isn't crazy, you know, your recovery is okay, your nutrition's okay, you're probably going to be okay. Now, as far as again, I think it goes back to like, why you would do the warm up stuff is more just like psychological preparedness, like the stuff we were talking about. And it's a good way to get your heart rate up, right? Which is then going to activate your system, right? Activate you. But again, bare minimum, you just said this, you got a power lifter. That's all they want to do. They don't care about being athletic, right? They don't necessarily care about other qualities other than lifting max weight. Um, you could probably just have them go in there and do the task that they're going to do that day, just at a reduced capacity and build up.
I don't know. I want to dig into a little bit of literature. I think to come back to this would be really cool. But we always talk about like how to make adaptations, we need to be exposed to a novel stimulus, something that's new. And if we're running, then we need to be moving in different ways because one of the big things that runners face in other injuries, but like bone stress injuries, how do we kind of decrease the injury risk there or injury rate? And we do a lot of running as runners, and certainly like starting a little slower and alternating your pace can have an effect and kind of making sure that you're not constantly doing the same thing. But getting exposure to like your your static stretches or your dynamic stretches or your dynamic warm-ups. Definitely lifting. I advocate for that. Those would be all important. That way we can, yeah, just yeah, get the body to respond.
I I kind of like what Matt you brought it up. I want to dig a little bit more into it about recovery and nutrition. Okay, so do you guys think that warm up is the one that prevents injury, or is the appropriate recovery and nutrition is the one that like truly defines whether you're going to be um, injury free or not?
Well, I mean, I think, right, well, there's a lot of good posts out there about like injury and pain. Nick Hanna, really good follow. Um, for all you people out there, you should follow him. He talks about like the ecosystem, right? Like your body, he equates that to like an ecosystem. So like Subhash, I don't think we can point to one thing causing an injury, right? Like it's not going to be your lack of warm up that screwed you over, right? It's not going to be, um, you know, that type of stuff. It's often a
Rest from pain.
combination. And sure, there's things that in certain aspects of your life are going to be have stronger influences, right? Like let's say you're super stressed, and that's not only is that a risk factor in itself, right? Increased stress can increase the odds of an injury or pain. Your then sleeping is poor, right? So that's two things. And then your nutrition isn't as great because whatever, maybe you're overeating or maybe you're not eating, and so and so and so, right? And maybe you're not being social, right? And all these things can that's now one thing, right? Starting with one thing that's now stemmed into just four. Um, so I almost forget what your question was, but instead of like pointing to one thing, I would
No,
view it. And yeah, I mean, what has a stronger influence? I'm not totally sure. I think they all could play a role. Again, I would think the warm up would have a pretty minimal
I could take a stab at
role in
that.
that though.
Yeah.
So that you answered that, Matt. Subhash's question was just talking back to the um, rest and nutrition aspect of was it injury prevention or
Yeah.
warm up.
Which one would like almost have like a more effect on injury preventions compared
Hmm.
to like well I no I definitely like your answer to that. Like I think I knew where you were going with it of saying like um it's not just one thing. I hate when during our school they always said it depends. I hated that the answer, but at this scenario I like the more we learn about it, I guess the more it seems like it depends. I don't know what Anthony, what were you gonna say? Like
I was just gonna say, like, I know that warm up versus the rest and nutrition, one is more important than the other. I mean, the idea of the ecosystem, I mean, one of the part of it is like that these systems all have a check. Um, we can never always be at the top of the mountain. Coming back down, we have our cycles, we have our tops where we're performing, we have our bottoms when we're resting. This is something that like we go through with our training cycles, but also on a daily basis when we have like our highs and lows. And so like when we're at the top, we're bodies in peak performance, like it's important that we are ready to go. When we're at the bottom, um, yeah, it's just kind of the other side of the spectrum.
yeah. I I I kind of like I definitely think it depends because I think this is what makes human body so complicated is that there's no right answer to do it, right? Because I know, people focus so much on warm-ups. Like you gotta play sports, you gotta warm up, you gotta lift weights, you gotta warm up, you gotta run, you gotta warm up, whether that's static stretching and all that stuff. And they're saying that this attributes to injury prevention. I was looking at it earlier that the statistics behind it and this article by who's this it was published in I don't know, I can't find it, but it was sports medicine journal or whatever, and they were saying that if you do some form of like dynamic movements at a part of your warm up, that it could reduce injury as much as 30%. And I don't know whether there's the statistics they're coming with this. I mean, I may have to dig a little bit more into it, but you know, I personally I would think that like rest and recovery almost plays more important factors to injury prevention than like warm up. Warm up should
Yeah.
be used as a way to kind of prep our body for the activity that we're about to do. And then once we do the activity in itself, right? Because now you've essentially put your body through this intense activities. You're gonna go through some, physiological fatigues and all these things that's happening, and you want your body to recover from it. And if you don't give your chance time to recover, then there's a high risk of you being injured. But I'm also thinking about like, in very much in a sense of biological plausibility, but I don't think that is always kind of correlates, and we know that a human body is incredible in terms of like adaptations and things like that. And if you continue throwing your body into doing a very intense activities, your body will adapt to it, right? Obviously within a range, but
Yeah.
I that kind of piqued the thought, but I'll let yeah go for it, Matt.
No, I didn't have much to add. I was just gonna say, yeah, my bias would say that recovery would have a greater impact. But maybe that's something we could try to look into. I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know if we actually find anything, but
I didn't think this conversation was going this way, but it's cool that it did. Um, Made me think the way about the way we do warm ups and why we do them. Uh, don't know that like what the terminology would be, or this is probably an explanation for it. But the way we condition our bodies, when we go to sleep, we condition our body to get ready to sleep by going through the same routines and habits of like you brush your teeth, maybe scrub your hands with the lavender soap, or like put some nice scents on or listen to Mozart's. But
I gotta
for
start
like
doing that, man.
right, but for like warm ups for sport, it was the same idea of conditioning our body so that yeah, we're peaked, ready to go. This kind of triggers us to get into that fight or flight mode of perform.
Yeah, you got to listen to the opposite of Mozart, whatever.
Dude,
Like
I actually,
Lil Wayne. Listen to Lil Wayne. That'll get you hyped.
no, dude, I can't listen to like amped up music like what most people do. You know, I gotta
Really?
listen to very calm music to do the activity in itself, man. Like it helps me zone in when I listen to calm music. So like sometimes like when I'm like lifting weights, like I almost have like a very slow song playing in the background.
Wow, dude, that's crazy.
Yeah, I know it's weird.
You dudes literally listen to Mozart to max out.
I know I'm not listening to Mozart, but like I'm definitely listening to like some slow songs.
Wow. Nah, dude, music gets me hyped for sure. The right song comes on, it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
that weight's going
Oh.
up.
No, I agree with you, Anthony. I think I like the word you're saying, the conditioning your
Yeah,
body
that's cool, man. I
into
like that. Yeah.
yeah into because I definitely think the psychological readiness like is so important in terms of uh being able to do the activity in itself, right? If you're not psychologically ready, I don't know if you guys have felt this before that like some days you're feeling amazing, right? You're like, yeah, dude, I can like crush this, no problem. And you go do the activity and you crush it. And the same activity, which is, completely doable, right? You're feeling like hot garbage. You don't feel good. Like you didn't sleep well. You're hungry or something's going on. You're stressed. I don't know. Your mom's calling you and saying things, that you don't want to do. And then you're out there, you're about to lift weight and you just can't do it or do
Shut
the
up,
activity.
mom.
I don't know if you guys feel that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Some days you got it, some days you don't. And sometimes all those boxes could be checked and you still have a bad workout or whatever. So
Yeah. I think
we're
conditioning
not
is,
robots, you know?
yeah. And I think that's what makes our human body such a complicated, like such an amazing, but it's like very complicated thing. Like I used to think, this CrossFit lifters were crazy. And I'm like, man, look at them. These guys are crazy. They're gonna hurt themselves. Or I used to think that like, when the posture mattered, right? In terms of like lifting postures. They say, yo, brace your core, right? What is core? Brace your core, breathe, contract the abdomens, don't do, I don't know, whatever you were doing when you were doing squats or deadlift, you got to keep your back straight and all those things. I used to think those mattered, but in everyday scenarios that it doesn't. Like we do so many things. I think I almost kind of would say that I don't know if you guys agree with me that people get hurt by not doing the other stuff than what they're doing, right? Because their body has adapted to lifting the way they've been lifting it.
Yes. Yes. I love your body adapts to the stresses you put on it. So even if you don't have quote unquote perfect deadlift technique, as long as it's repeatable, that's good enough.
Yeah, you're in that cycle up and down and like you need the novel stimulus.
Yeah. This is why, like, it's one of the things that like it's written here that the notes that like I had was like this activating, right? What is this activating? What does it mean? And I think that's a very um good question to ask because like a lot of times people do static stretching or like any sort of warm ups they're trying to do is they're trying to activate some certain things to be able to do the activity, but does it really activate whatever they're trying to activate?
Yeah, or like the banded stuff for the glutes, right?
Yeah,
Grab the booty bands, right?
the booty bands.
Which I will say, right? You will feel a great gluteal contraction, great booty contraction with that. But I think what you're trying to get at is like the whole activation thing that hints at like muscles turning off. Muscles don't turn off, right? Like so again, it's probably more like that psychological you believe that you're doing something to help better your workout, but in reality, that's probably something you don't need. And I would encourage people to like, if you have a mindset of like, oh my gosh, I need to turn my glutes off. Like, I would argue, or turn my glutes on. Like, that's probably a harmful narrative that you have for yourself, and you probably
Mhm.
should change that one too. And then as well as like, right, let's classic gym bro all the time, right? You hear this all the time. Like they're doing they're getting ready to bench. They're like, oh, let's go bench. Like, oh no, hold on, I got to do my banded external rotation, or I'm gonna f up my shoulder, right? So like again, that's not a healthy narrative to have, right? That's a not healthy relationship to that warm up. You feel like you need to do that in order to not, or yeah, in order to not get injured. That shows that like, right? It's basically like a mindset of fragility, right? So that's where something I would challenge that and be like, hey, I don't think you can do it, but you got to change your reasoning for doing it. You can't, I wouldn't be cool with that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about gradual loading and just get your
Ooh,
toes exposed to the movement.
that's a great point, Anthony. Because I had written it just down here, like saying like what Matt was talking about earlier was a gradual loading is what we were talking about, and I almost kind of wrote that and also variabilities of warm up. That's one of the two things that I wrote it down, saying like if you're doing the same, even if it's a dynamic warm up, your body adapts to it. Do you think that's even beneficial anymore? Right? Let's I don't know. Let's dive into it. I don't know what you guys gotta say on that. What's up, Anthony? You want to start there?
There. Yeah, I don't know. I go to the gym and like a couple times a week, and I have a very similar routine, which is like not like it's good. It gets me moving, it gets me ready. But then I think about like try to go and do like a cartwheel the other day, and like I
Oh,
wasn't ready to do that. My body was
I got the videos, man. I got the videos. I gotta post it up.
so variability is important, but it's like definitely can't go so far out of the box that I mean, yeah, just you got to work on things in doses.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. I've seen it on Instagram, which is a really cool idea. It's like high school slash college strength coaches. They'll like make it a game, right? So I've seen people like playing spike ball as a warm up, which is like sweet, right? That accomplishes the things I was talking about, right? Activates you, gets the heart rate up, all that good stuff, and it's fun, right? It's team bonding. It's much more funner, much more fun than stretching your hamstrings for. All right, guys, we're gonna do 3 by 1 minute stretching your hamstrings. We're gonna play 5 minutes of spike ball. People are gonna want to do spike ball. That's awesome. That's sick. And yeah, right. Like in theory, that makes you a more resilient human, right? Because now you're like moving in all these different planes. You're thinking, you're reacting. So again, I would argue that's a better option, something like that, than stretching your hamstrings. But
What about the adaptation, man? It's because I guess if you played sorry, spike ball is a great example because of how much variability spike ball has as an example. But if you were doing like, I know I fall into this trap. Like so, if I'm doing a dynamic movements to prepare for soccer game or soccer practices, I do the same thing, right? Your body will adapt to that thing. And do you think at that point it ends up becoming effective to do that at all? Or is there by changing things will make it a little bit better?
yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question that I'm not sure I have a great answer to, but I think there's
It's
arguments to both, right? I think let's say you're doing like jumping. You want to be good at jumping for sport, right? Pretty much every sport you want to be good at jumping. So that's something to do like repetitively and be good at. But yeah, also movement variability is important too, right? Because on the field, you're not gonna be able to predict everything. So I'd say, especially for like athletes, field athletes, like being variable is probably more important. Whereas a power lifter, you know what you're basically going to do every time. Maybe they would be more like repeatability would be more important for them.
if I'm an PT and I'm trying to just build robust athletes, that's my mission. spike balls is much of a sport. There's something along the lines of that area that I would need. But if you're going to be a soccer PT, or we're towing the lines of becoming like a sports coach, or like a something like that area, yeah, you're probably going to need more variability in something of a game that might target those specific tasks. So like if you're a soccer player, your footwork versus your agility versus your kind of reaction and being able to read a field.
Yeah. No, I feel like a lot of it is it depends. It depends. Task specific, what you're trying to accomplish. I think it depends on that. What sports you're playing, right? Given that, though, I kind of want to bring it back to like static versus dynamic movements, or right stretching, whatever. How would you tier it if you were to tier it? Right? How would you tier it?
Here, as in what?
Like, like I would put this above this one, or like you know how they do like A tier, B tier, C tier. Like, how would you guys tier that?
So you're talking like warm up, what I would like at the top, like my
Yeah,
tiers in order of like
yeah,
preference.
yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean I think I probably made it pretty clear, but like dynamic would be at the top. So and again, super broad, like just dynamic warm up can be kind of anything that we talked about, from plyos to some like mobility type stuff to like the spike ball. And then yeah, I would go probably dynamic stretching, and then static stretching would be at the bottom for me, especially as like a pre-activity type thing. Because like at least with dynamic stretching in theory, you're going to be moving more. You're going to get your heart rate up a little bit more than with a static stretch. You're just kind of laying there.
Yeah, you got that Lego pyramid, and I agree. Dynamic warm ups at the top, down to the static stretching. Honestly, like kind of like that cognitive load of like right bottom's probably not going to take a whole lot of like cognitive effort versus like at the
Mhm.
top. Like there's a lot of variability and things that we can gain from it, and prepare for different movements, but higher cognitive load.
Yeah. My bias is almost like, kind of says the same thing, but like almost kind of like want to lean towards like saying like activity preparedness, psychological activity preparedness, right? Whatever conditioning that you use to prepare yourself to doing the activity in itself, right? Sometimes I personally think that would probably trump it over the other one. But is there research behind it? I don't know, man. We probably have to look into it.
So you're
uh,
saying like whatever the patient or athlete would enjoy the most or like prefers.
yeah, but I don't know, dude.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
could be,
I'd probably think that too.
yeah. I have one question. I think this will be the final question. This is the one that Anthony mentioned earlier. Um, is it better to do no warm-ups, right? Or spend time doing stretching? Which one is better? I think that's a good thing to think about, right?
I think it depends on what you're doing it for. I could expand on
Like
that.
let's say for injury preventions, like for a second discussion, injury
Okay,
preventions.
injury prevention, sure. I like to do yoga sometimes, and like from a biopsychosocial perspective, or just like a mental or just a holistic perspective. You get some static stretching in there, and we're not doing it necessarily. I don't do it maybe to stretch a tight muscle, but just to um, cool down the body, to focus on some breath, to ground and prepare myself for the people say static stretch after a sport, and I guess I wouldn't disagree. I think in the most basic sense, you're grounding and working on cooling down athletes. Like I'm okay with it. Um, Before sport, kind of like listen to that Mozart's. Like, is it grounding you and or getting you like kind of more in tune with your body? Is it better than dynamic warm ups? Probably not, but like, is it better than nothing? I feel like it might be.
Okay. Actually, that kind of I like what you were saying about cool down. Uh, let me ask you this: would you say that cool down follows a similar, um, I guess, mindset or like the of like similar to what you would do normally for warm ups as well? Like, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if I'm asking this question right, but
Yeah, like it should it be task specific or can it be like
yeah.
something like different? Um, I yeah, good question. I don't know.
Well, let me go back, even
That's a
back
good question.
more. Is cool down important first, and
Yeah,
then we'd follow up with that question second.
yeah. I mean, my bias again says no, but a recent thought I've had is like sometimes like I'm leaving the gym and like I'm feeling just really, really anxious, really, really stressed. So I've definitely had the thought of like maybe I should do something. So right, I mean, our body naturally is going to kick into the parasympathetic process. Thankfully, we don't have to think about that. But right, there are things you can do to promote that. Right, if you're going to the gym, you're like, oh, I got to get to work, and you're just like in this stress state every day. That's probably going to limit recovery, which is going to limit your gains. Whereas, like maybe if, and this is purely, I have no idea. Maybe if I were to spend like 5 minutes listening to Mozart and deep breathing, maybe that would make me feel a little less stressed, which would then impact recovery, which would then impact gain. So that's a thought I've recently had. So I'm glad you asked that. But also, like,
I
I don't spend a bunch of time doing stuff like that. Like, Rain, you said you do yoga. Well, I sometimes do struggle with anxiety and stress. So, like, maybe I'm somebody who would benefit from, yo, bro, do more like chill stuff rather than all this sympathetic input, right? Maybe I need more
Yeah,
parasympathetic.
yeah.
I did a program during the physical therapy clinical rotations, and during the time I was introduced to one of the strength coaches. His name's Jason Brown, and he did his stuff for a while. And something I liked from it, I think, was just that. Like, it wasn't he was having us do yoga at the end, but after a hard workout, it was the final like kind of cool down part was you're gonna lie on your back. You're gonna focus on some diaphragmatic breathing or just some stomach breathing, and you're just going for like 10, 15 deep breaths, letting the body to kind of calm down.
I, I don't know the answers to this. I think
Yeah, none of us do.
I,
We don't have a
yeah,
research based answer.
I think this would be something to look into more. I think it definitely be a cool video to post. Uh, but I
Yeah.
do have. I keep saying the last, but like this is definitely going to be the last question I want to ask you guys. So
You're
for an
teasing us,
average
bro.
Joe, I know average Joe, right? Um, what recommendation would you give as a physical therapist? Someone comes to you, says, "Yo, dude, my bros, I'm trying to, just go through my daily activities, daily things, right? And sometimes I feel tightness, sometimes I'm in pain, sometimes, I don't want to do things. What would you recommend for me to, prep me for my day? What would you say?
Okay, so I would probably just promote. So is this a gym bro or is this a regular bro?
Just this is just the regular bro,
All right, so not a gym bro. So
not a
I,
gym
if you're
bro.
complaining of tightness, I'd probably promote movement, right? So as a PT, you'd want to promote movement. Be like, yo, dude, there's a lot of options. You could do some stretching. I probably wouldn't start with that. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I definitely would not. Let's be real. I'd probably start with, hey, like you could start going to the gym, right? Let's promote the physical activity
No, he
guidelines.
doesn't have time to go to the gym. He doesn't have time to go to
Oh,
the
come on,
gym.
regular bro. Yo, schmo. Go to
Yeah.
the gym, bro. All right. So I would probably encourage him just to move more. So maybe just go outside for a walk. That is short, low barriers from a time perspective, right? From a driving perspective. That would be probably my recommendation is walking and some sort of movement stuff at home. and you probably don't need to worry about like foam rolling or static.
Yeah. What would you say, Anthony?
Yeah, whatever they got access to. If walking is good for them, that'd be great. But yeah, just kind of going off the physical activity guidelines is what other people have reached, and probably great. Yeah, people call it the low hanging fruit. Like
Yeah.
that would be where I'd start. Just get them, see if they can do some strength, if that is something that they're interested in, and get like yeah, some moderate, get their heart rate up, do some stuff at home, do some stuff outside, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Um, I kind of want to summarize the things that we've talked about, and I think it kind of uh, falls into this kind of core principles, I guess, a little bit. And I know that activity depends. It depends on activities. It depends on many things, right? To for injury prevention, whatever. It depends on task, whatever, right? But I definitely think that like some of the core principles that if we were to utilize warm ups, right, what did that mean? You know, it would you would almost want to do some sort of like stimulation to the system, right? To increase your heart rate, increase your blood flow, pretty much like prime your nervous system to get you ready to do the activities, right? And I don't think static stretching would do that, but maybe psychologically will do that. I don't know, right? And it would be, I would say that like another core principle would be like, that resembles a workout. That would be something activity specific related. Obviously, I know that time is a big thing. So do something that is time effective so that you can get into your activity that you're trying to do as quickly as possible. And while also focusing on like performance, right? Not necessarily thinking in a sense where, you got to activate your muscles like this so that you don't hurt. Because if you do certain things like that, saying things like that, you're almost kind of, promoting this narrative that your body is not so strong or your body is very fragile, right? And
Yeah,
so I think
not
doing
cool.
something fun, yeah, doing something fun, right? Keep it short, keep it light, get into the you know activities that resembles whatever you're trying to do, trying to while with the goal of raising your heart rate, raising your blood flow, and some form of neuromuscular system like jump start or something. Would you guys agree with that?
That
100%.
summarizes it well. Yes, sir.
Yeah. 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 Well, thank you guys for watching our video. I think this was a good discussion to have on warm-ups because there's a lot of information that goes around. I would think that like a lot more misinformations than like real information's out there about these things. So thank you for listening. I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. Um, have a great night. Peace.
Peace.